Hey guys, how are we doing today? We're starting on the third week of lecture, which means that we're on chapter 3, and that is on organic compounds. So as always, I'm going to share my screen so that we can kind of start with some vocabulary first. So let me get my screen up and going here. Move some stuff around like usual so I have room. Hang on just a second. All right, so again, this is chapter 3, organic molecules. All right, so let's start with some definitions. What is an organic molecule? Essentially, an organic molecule is anything that's carbon-based. Okay, so it's a carbon-based molecule. If you remember from what I was saying last week, what I was talking about last week, carbon is essential for life, and it's one of the essential elements that all living things have. And part of that is because of how versatile it is, how many different chemical bonds it can make. So, for example, well, let me type it first. We'll do, so carbon can make up to 4 covalent bonds. So remember that covalent bonds are shared, okay? Its favorite molecules, or atoms, I should say, to make chemical bonds with are nitrogen, hydrogen, goodness, and other carbon atoms, okay? So perhaps you've noticed that those 4 things are the ones that make up most of our bodies, and they are the same things that make up most organic things. And that's because they like to bind with carbon. So let me come over here real quick and just try to kind of show you or remind you about carbon as an atom and how its valence shell allows it to make these additional bonds. So carbon has an atomic number of 6. So we know it has 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and 6 electrons. And in this, we're interested in the electrons. So here's my nucleus, this little guy. Okay, so let's go ahead and place our electrons. Since there are 6 of them, we know that 2 can go in the inner shell, which leaves 4 to go out here in the outer or the valence shell. It's these 4 in the valence shell that are going to try to make bonds with other atoms. Remember that a valence shell can hold 8 electrons, okay? And that's what makes an atom happy, is to have as close to that number as possible. Carbon likes to pick up more electrons. That's how it can be happy. And the way it picks up electrons, again, is through joining with nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen, and other carbon atoms, okay? So everything we talk about throughout this chapter, because it's specifically focusing on this kind of organic chemistry, if you will. Hopefully the chemistry part didn't freak you out because it's organic compounds, but basically it's the chemistry of life. Anyway, yes, now I totally lost my train of thought because I said chemistry and I threw myself off. Oh well. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, so throughout this, carbon is going to be one of the main atoms that we talk about. That's what I was going to say. It was in there. It was in my brain. Just didn't want to come out right away. Do you ever have a day like that? Where it takes you like forever to finish a sentence? That's kind of my everyday. I feel like I start talking, I'll be telling my kids to do something, and I'll be like, okay, you guys need to go get you need to get, and my kids are sitting there like, yeah, I can't get the words to leave my head to get to my mouth so I can speak them. Anywho, again, more information you didn't need, but hey, we're all friends, right? In this Zoom class, so I gave it to you anyway. All right, let's continue. Let's talk about the simplest type of organic molecule that there is. Those are hydrocarbons. So you probably are familiar with hydrocarbons in the sense that they get talked about a lot in regard to the environment, the atmosphere, global warming, greenhouse gases, things like that. And I won't go into all the details of it, but one of the simplest of these hydrocarbons then is the gas methane. So hydrocarbons, again, simplest organic molecule. The simplest hydrocarbon is methane. A lot of the gases that end in A and E are going to be hydrocarbons, your ethane, methane, octane, pentane. What else is there? There's like a ton. So those are hydrocarbons. And as the name implies, they are made with, hang on, I gotta get my pen going. They are made with hydrogen, hence the hydro part, and carbon, okay? So methane, for example, looks like this. Okay? Remember that these straight lines here are covalent bonds. So it is one carbon atom covalently bonded to 4 hydrogen atoms. And in this way, carbon has managed to pick up 4 more of the electrons at once. So if this was the one in methane, it's picked up 4 more electrons, and so it's happy. The chemical formula for methane is CH4, okay? Because there's 1 carbon right there and 4 hydrogens, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? So that's what hydrocarbons are. And again, the simplest type organic molecule. Let's move on. I'm going to go from here to talking about organic molecules. But first, I'm going to talk about how organic molecules are built. So I'm going to give you some more vocabulary. It's your favorite, right? I get excited when I see vocabulary too. Okay. So let's first talk about monomers and polymers. I also get excited when I get to talk about Greek and Latin roots because hardcore nerd here. That's super helpful in science if you know kind of some basics for your Greek and Latin roots, like hydro, water. Phil, I think we talked about, did we do hydrophilic and hydrophobic yet? Might have done that with my other class. Anyway, so monomers, we're going to look at this term. Mono is meaning one. Poly means many. So we already know we're talking about one of something and then many of something. So what is this one of something? So a monomer is a single one building block. And polymers are many building blocks that are strung together. Okay, so let me switch back to my pen. Maybe. All right. So if I have my block here, like you can literally think of a block if you want. It's easier to picture. My single block is a monomer. When I take single blocks and link them together, I have a polymer. Okay, because there's many of these single block monomers. Monomer. Many of these single block monomers, okay? All right, so basically, if you think about monomers and polymers being the things that make up our bodies, things that make up our food that we eat, the things that make up our hormones, enzymes, which are proteins, you kind of can begin to picture how we work and how organic organisms work. Because everything on its basic level is going to break down into a monomer. And from there, obviously, you can break it down onto an atomic level, but we're not going to go back into the atomic level. So let's take like an apple that you would eat. Apples are basically carbohydrates, okay? Sugars, glucose. Glucose is a polymer. It's a long string of smaller monomers all hooked together. When you eat food, the polymers that make up that food get broken down in your digestive tract into monomers. They get broken down into small, tiny pieces, okay? And then those monomers can be broken down into their different elements that are in them, the different atoms, and used by the body, okay? I mean, if you think about, again, if you're kind of going to think about an apple as a bunch of polymers all put together, imagine trying to swallow an apple whole. Like, even if you could do it, what good is it going to do you? That would be difficult for your body to break down in that form. So the process of breaking down from a polymer to a monomer starts as soon as you put something in your mouth, right? That's part of that digestive process, is when you chew and mechanically break it down, release enzymes that are going to break down all the chemical bonds. And then as it moves through your digestive tract, it keeps breaking down into smaller and smaller pieces. So your body takes the food, a bunch of polymers, and breaks it down into little tiny monomers that your body can then convert to energy. Hopefully that made sense, because we're going to talk about a bunch of them, a bunch of different types of polymers. But before I do that, we're going to talk about two different reactions that allow monomers and polymers to kind of go back and forth from one form to the other. We know that you can build monomers into polymers, right? I can link a bunch of monomers together, but then I can also break polymers apart, okay? So when your body is building new cells, it's going to take a bunch of protein and lipid monomers, and it's going to assemble them. It's going to put them together into long chains. But when your body's digesting food, it's going to take polymers and break them down into a bunch of monomers, okay? So we have this back and forth process that's happening in the body constantly. Actually, let me go to my text here. When we're talking about building polymers, putting a bunch of monomers together, no. Got so much electronic stuff all over my desk, it makes it hard. Hang on. Okay, so when we're talking about building polymers, they get assembled through a process called dehydration reaction. Okay, so we have dehydration reaction, and these build polymers, build polymers by joining monomers together. Okay, all right. Basically, what that means is this. Come here, pen. All right, let's do it. Let me switch colors. How about green? Green's a good color, don't you think? Okay, so dehydration reaction. If I have my monomers and I need to build more cell walls for my cells, right? I have to link all the monomers that are the building blocks for cell walls. I have to link them all together, right? It's like you can't build a wall out of one brick. You have to put the bricks together. Well, that's what your cell's doing. In order to do that, we have this interesting little trying to put that together. Hang on a second, guys. I don't want to do it that way. I'm going to do it this way. Maybe. Okay. So I have my monomers. Okay. And on the end of our monomers, we usually have some extra atoms. So like there's a hydrogen atom on that one. And this right here is called a hydroxyl ion or hydroxide ion. I'm not going to have you memorize the names of these, but they're just some of the elements, some of the atoms that hang off the end of our organic molecules, okay? We'll pretend like the square here is a monomer. I'm not giving you the chemical stuff for it. It's just representing a monomer. And a dehydration reaction, which I can see got erased when I did whatever I did. Start again. Remember what I put last time. How? Right, guys. I already know what I put. I always say it different every single time. How cells link monomers into polymers. I said some version of the same thing. Okay. So in a dehydration reaction, what's going to happen here is that we're going to remove water. Isn't that what dehydrate means? It means to remove water, right? Well, that's what's going to happen. The way that cells do this, remove the water, is by taking this hydrogen from one monomer and this hydroxyl group from the other monomer, and it joins them together. And hey, what do you know? We just made water. H2O. Nifty. When we did that, it gets this hydrogen out of the way, this hydroxyl group out of the way, so that our monomers here can now bond with each other instead. Pretty dang cool, okay? So when you have a bunch of these dehydration reactions, you just keep linking polymers or monomers together. You just keep building out your chain through dehydration reactions, okay? All right, that's how they build polymers. Now, how are we going to break those polymers down again? If you think about it for a second, I guess you can guess. We have a dehydration reaction that's going to build polymers. What do you think is going to be involved in breaking polymers? If you guess something with water, you're right. That reaction is called hydrolysis, which literally means breaking water. Lys, L-Y-S, or L-Y-S-E, it means to break. And so here we have hydrolysis, water breaking, okay, breaking water. So hydrolysis is how cells break polymers down into monomers. Okay, essentially what we're going to do, we're going to use that water that we just took out for our dehydration reaction, and we're going to put it back in. Okay, so let me come over here. Again, here's our polymer. We want to break this down. Maybe this is part of a digestive process. We're going to, our body's digesting food. So in order to break this down, we got to take this water molecule up here, and we're going to use it to disrupt the bonds between the monomers in this chain. So we're going to put water back in. Okay, that means that this is going to have hydrogen, and this one's going to have a hydroxyl group. And what do you know? We have just broken up this big long group of polymers here, or this big polymer, by putting water back in. So what we now have, keep getting smaller and smaller every time to make it fit. Now we have this. Okay. Obviously, these can be broken down, so you just go back to having one. All right. So this is kind of the most, how do I want to put this, intricate part of the lecture, where I kind of go through all of these different terms and, you know, how you put monomers together into polymers and what hydrocarbons are, and I reminded you of covalent bonds. The rest of the lecture from here is a little bit bigger in the sense that we're going to talk about the different kinds of organic molecules that are made when you put monomers together into polymers. I'm going to pause the lecture here, and normally, as I said before to you, I can see your faces when I'm doing these lectures. I can look at all of you. I can see who's looking lost, who's feeling frustrated. I can't do that over Zoom, which is hard for me. So I always tell you, I need feedback, but really and truly I do. So if you are struggling with this, if this did not make sense, if I did not explain it well, send me an email, please, or post it even on the discussion forum that I have on our class page, so that I know if I need to explain this differently, explain it better. It just kind of gives me a gauge of how you guys are doing, so that when the midterm comes, everybody's prepared for it. Like, I don't see that you did fine in chapters 1 and 2, but then everything in chapter 3 was just gone because I can't read your faces in person. So I'm going to stop here, and yeah, again, let me know kind of how you're doing with all this. Okay. All right, I'll be back.